Netanyahu has now done a complete 180 that surprises absolutely no humane person, as he's decided to walk away from the hostage ceasefire deal in Gaza that Hamas agreed to, Biden endorsed, and Biden also claimed that Israel was going to agree to, showing which piece in the puzzle clearly does not want this war to stop. And it also exposes Biden for running more defense for them in their genocidal actions, as Netanyahu has came out and claimed he's only interested in a partial deal to free some of the hostages, but would allow him to continue his destruction and death going on in Gaza. And his coalition partners threatened to leave the coalition, topple the government, if the ceasefire deal that Biden was speaking on, that Hamas agreed to, if this became an agreement, which of course would take power away from Netanyahu. So he said no way. And it shows that Biden's claim that Israel supported this deal was just entirely fabricated. And with almost 40,000 dead Palestinians, mostly being civilians, it seems that Israel is going to turn back to its impossible and imaginary goal of not stopping killing women and children until they rid of Hamas. So I want to also take some time to showcase some of the propaganda going around in American media, some of the things actually happening in Gaza on the ground, and the ways that Zionism affects Arabs, Arab Americans, and even Americans in terms of their perspective on this genocide, starting with the ADL director himself comparing a keffiyeh to a swastika.
If you wouldn't tolerate it if someone is wearing a swastika on their arm, I'm sorry, you shouldn't tolerate it if they're wearing a keffiyeh.
Now, of course, a keffiyeh is literally the traditional headdress that men just wear in the Middle East, and comparing it to a swastika is just horrendous at best. It's back to the typical Islamophobia of trying to conflate all Muslims to terrorists. So if they're wearing this headdress, of course, they just hate Jews and they're all terrorists. So we can't let them do that. It's sickening. And people like this have no place in American media. And MSNBC, of course, offered absolutely no pushback on the claim. Now, here's another clip of the IDF tying an injured Palestinian to the hood of their armored vehicle while they do a patrol. You often hear those on the pro-Israel side relentlessly claiming that Hamas is responsible for all the civilian death because Hamas is using human shields, but they never condemn the IDF for literally using human shields for taking actions like this. These clips never go viral. They're never brought up by Zionists. But here is also Bet Selem, a Jewish organization literally located in Israel that is speaking of the official IDF policy of using Palestinians as human shields to carry out military operations. So through this, you can clearly see the one-sided nature in terms of coverage on this conflict, or how Israel forces, the IDF, just this weekend killed 101 Palestinians and wounded 170 others in the span of 24 hours, going through residential neighborhoods and just massacring them. I'm sure we could all imagine the reaction, the American media, how Zionists would be portraying this if this was Hamas doing that in Israel, but our politicians are bought and paid for by AIPAC, and our media just follows them through the foxholes and only covering the side of this conflict that supports staunch Zionism and their beliefs. You have to have soldier soul to not see this for what it is, to not be outraged equally about Palestinian death the same way you are about Israeli deaths, and horribly gullible if you still believe that Netanyahu, the one who's killed almost 40,000 civilians, is the one wanting peace and a resolution, or actually even cares about his hostages.